Welcome to the EarthWorks podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hi, everybody. Kevin Hicks with EarthWorks back for another podcast. Haven't done one in a little while. Pretty excited to have Mr. Dave Wilber back on. It's been several months, I think, since we've talked, hasn't it?
Hi, Kevin. How are you?
I'm good. We've got kind of a grab bag today, and we kind of went over it a little bit beforehand, but this will be a free-flowing conversation, and hopefully we'll cover some topics that are pertinent to what all of you are dealing with right now. Excuse me for a minute.
As you can see, I'm very casual. You know, I got the Carhartt hoodie on today, and I'm just hanging in the office, and it's snowing in Denver. It's a good time to be thinking about things.
Absolutely.
You know? So yeah.
Absolutely. And that's kind of the direction I'd like this to take. And I keep looking at my notes so I don't forget something, but want to talk a little bit about, start with maybe some of the vast experience you've had with construction. And I think first and foremost, there's a lot of clubs that are, they've seen their revenues come up considerably in the last couple of years. Some of them are sitting on some reserves, and they're if they're not already doing it, they're thinking about renovation projects, restoration projects. So I wanted to talk about some of the pitfalls that superintendents and clubs can avoid from the get-go, really, but also during the process. What disasters can you warn people about that hey, we've done this, we've seen this, don't go down that path? I mean, that's pretty broad.
We're talking about renovation and restoration, right?
Yeah.
In that genre. Yeah. Well, like what I like to do is go back and look at the stuff that's worked and the stuff that hasn't worked, and and why.
Sure.
Right. And unfortunately, a lot of times we've really had to do some really strong postmortem stuff on what happened. And it's not like there's been, what is a failure? I don't know what you would call, a failure. Anytime you're trying to improve something and do something better, you could look at it positively and say, well, we did this and this is a good thing.
Sure.
But and the other thing is, I hear a lot of people talking about money and being cost conscious and all that sort of stuff, but I think they have no concept about where to cut costs and where not to.
Right.
Or how to budget plan in the first place.
Yeah.
Okay, so we want to, rebuild a couple greens and do some bunkers and fix that tee and all that, and it's like, what's it going to cost, right? Everybody wants to hear that number first.
Let's go right to the bottom right corner first. Before discussing goals or anything else, right?
Yeah. And the big pitfall is tossing a number out.
Right.
Because that's the only one they're going to remember.
From the superintendent side. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Because I've done
What's that going to cost? Well, I think we could do that for, $450,000.
Right.
That's the only number and then when you sit down and then they start adding a little bit of work to it, and while we're here, let's do that concrete, and I forgot, we got to move that main line if we're going to do that, here it comes. Right. And then you come back to him and say, well, yeah, I know we talked about 450, but it looks like it's going to be more like, 560. And there it starts. And what that starts is this doubt, and
a loss of credibility.
Right. Does Mr. Superintendent really know what he's talking about?
Right.
And so what I would always do with people when they would call me up and start to talk about, renovation, restoration, right? And restoration is maybe a different animal, because there's some artwork involved, and, you don't always know, right? If we're really going to take the 1929 aerial and put the bunkers back, there's a lot of things that happened between 1929 and now, and
Sure.
There's a lot of archaeology involved in that. But the startling thing to me, Kevin, is that I would say to superintendent calls me up and say, well, they want to do this, that, or the other, whatever it is, and immediately I want to think about it like a contractor would think about it, or like and I want to, okay, how many square feet is that? How many acres is that?
Right.
How many you know, like those are the numbers.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I don't know. Well, look, let's start with that. Okay. So you want to do a bunch of T-tops. Well, you know, get out there with the wheel and a tape measure and a laser and start figuring it out.
Mm-hmm.
We got to do 300 and whatever, you know, square feet or two, you know, I'm sorry, I'm just throwing numbers around, you know, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And don't estimate and don't, well, yeah, it's about, you know, 320 square feet per, no. Like,
and we've got tools that can get us down to the gnats behind at this point.
you could get on Google Earth and get really close.
Right.
Yeah, really. I mean, it's like we have crazy tools now, but there's no substitute for the tape measure and the wheel.
That's right.
You know.
So this might be jumping ahead, but at what point is it important to have an outside agency involved in the planning process, i.e. an architect or a land planner or a, you know, whatever it might be. I will use architect as the example, but at what point, you know, is it a dollar figure or is it what parts of the golf course you're gonna address that you should have somebody almost as much as protection for the superintendent as protection for the project and the membership?
Well, yeah, I think, you know, I mean, I've made my living as an independent consultant, you know, since I quit being a golf course superintendent in the 90s. And sure, I'm going to sit here and say, you know, hire a good consultant, right? I mean, it's not surprising that I would feel that way, but I don't think there's ever been a situation where I haven't saved pretty close to what my fees were, you know, working with somebody, right?
Just with the experience.
Yeah, keeping them out of trouble or just, you know, looking over a contractor's shoulder or bringing in an architect and saying, hey, Mr. Architect, that's a nice idea, but that's that's not in the cards.
Yeah, you're in Denver now. That doesn't work here.
Whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, or you know, the other thing is that I walked into so many situations, Kevin, where the really good intentions of, hey, we could really fix our golf course up over, you know, X number of years. I mean, to simplify things, you know, we could do 3 greens a year for 6 years and, you know, and that turns out to be a real fail.
Oh.
The members hate it. Everybody hates it.
They hate you.
The pricing, you know, doesn't work.
Yep.
You know, it invites a lot of armchair architects to come in and second guess, you know, the first thing that you do. And
constant state of disruption.
Yeah, and then everybody's scared of their shadow for the next thing, and it's like, no. So we're really actually against that kind of idea. I think in the past it used to be a very, you know, we'll do this many bunkers a year, this many greens a year,
based on a master plan or what have you, right?
That's what I'm getting to.
Yeah.
So the master plan, which I think for a lot of people was a beautiful tool, has probably caused more boardroom fights than just about anything that I've been involved with as far as sitting in the, you know.
Yeah.
And the worst thing, you know, that I'm thinking about a bunch of situations where the architect did this beautiful job putting together master plan materials, and this stuff goes up in the, you know, in the clubhouse somewhere. Here's our master plan. We're so proud of it. And the dudes are walking by with their whiskeys, just hating the thing.
Whiskey's in a Sharpie,
right? You know, they've never seen one of these things before. They don't even know they're going to move that bunker. I don't want them to fill in that bunker. You know, and it just like, okay, so yeah, we won't do that. We're going to have the town hall meeting. And those can be tricky. They worked out really good. I saw Brad Klein handle a town hall meeting for an architect, which I thought was brilliant. The California Golf Club. They hired Brad as a consultant. They had me and they had Kyle Phillips as the architect. And Brad, you know, with his vast knowledge of architecture and what, you know, what's right and wrong and all that sort of stuff, you know, made amazing presentations. And they had 2 key members who had already gone out and met with small groups of people and done the, you know, sold it to them before any of this material ever got put up or done anything. So what I'm getting at is the, you know, premature numbers, premature big ideas, Here's our master plan.
Right.
Things like that are huge pitfalls.
And piecemealing it from there.
And I know some of my architect friends are going to hear this and they go, well, dude, I'm trying, we got to have a plan. We got to have a roadmap and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, yes, you do. But there are really much better ways to present that than, the way that we've been doing it.
Yeah.
And this idea that we're going to save the club money by putting the 10-year master plan in place it's never saved money.
Right.
We would have been lots better off, closing half the golf course or 3, 6, 7 holes, whatever it is.
Yep.
Getting all that work done, opening it up to greatness, and moving on.
Yeah.
But the 10-year plan to dink around to save money is not a saving.
The one contrary to that argument that I've lived through was it does help allocate resources. If a club's not going to assess, and they're working it into their operating budget, that is a good thing. But I've got a club here locally that has been working through a master plan, 2 different architects, 2 different superintendents, and gosh, at least 10 years worth of work, and they're not even close to done. And they're exactly where you're describing. They're, the members are fighting with each other. And then there's another factor that's worked into this is with the influx of new memberships, instead of being short 30 members, they've now got a waiting list of 35 people.
Right.
The demographic of the new member has changed remarkably. And so now you've got these factions in the club that are completely different, and they want different goals. And, one wants flash and one wants nothing ever changed, because I joined here in 1941 and I've been happy with it ever since. And you're right. It's a tough one. The longer you stretch it out, I think the more painful it gets.
So, it's been my pleasure to be given a couple of honorary memberships, or whatever you want to call it, to some different places that we've worked on. I mean, what a nice thing.
Sure.
And, I don't really aspire to be a country club member. And while I love the game and I love golf, I don't, I'm not going to play golf every day.
Right.
And I don't live in some of these places, but, thank you for the member number. That's awesome.
Right.
It's nice. Right.
Yeah.
And it's a nice thing, and it's a very classy thing. But, I'm thinking back to 40-year-old Dave Wilber, 15 years ago, and the kind of golf I wanted to play and what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
I had just been dipped in Scotland. I had just, Walter Woods had taught me how to hit the low ball. I want to play the tough stuff, man. Sure. I want to play on the windy day. I want to do all that, and then now today, 55-year-old Dave, whose knees are jacked and all kinds of other stuff. What I want to do is I want to go out and play 9 and, and maybe have 3 clubs in my little quiver.
Right.
Right. And so that's 55-year-old Dave. And then what's 65-year-old Dave going to want to do on the golf course? And so, I mean, that's the thing that I think a lot of these people don't think. They say, well, here's our 10-year master plan. Well, that guy who's sitting at the, at the board meeting, or that man or that woman, I shouldn't be that way. When they're 55, it's like, yeah, that's what we should do. And then, a hip replacement, a knee surgery, and oh damn, why did we sign off on these bunkers being so deep?
Wow, that's a great. I never thought about that. Just the length of time to finish a master plan and how much, because I'm the same way. I've moved up a set of tees now, and I'm not proud. I could care less. I got kids that can outdrive me by 50 yards, so I've I've moved up just to give myself an edge.
Yeah, the golf that I want to play is just so different.
Great point.
And yes, there was a period of time in my golf thing when I actually thought I might get good at golf. Jim Farron and I were, competing with each other, and Jim was such a great golfer. And all I wanted to do was just, if I could get good enough to beat Jim in a match play every now and then, by virtue of, being able to pull some really good shots out of the bag now and then, and to be able to negotiate how many strokes he was going to give me and have a great match, that was my goal, right? This is like, it wasn't about a number or anything. It's just, I want to be competitive and beat Farron.
Yeah.
Or whatever, or not look like an elf, when I'm, with a new prospective client or something.
Yep. Totally.
And, Mark Parsonen used to talk about that with me all the time. Mark was such a great striker of the ball, but he wasn't always that way. He worked at it constantly, to get great. And he said, I want to have the credibility that it needs to, to do that. Right.
And that's true for superintendents too, I think.
It is.
You don't have to be a scratch golfer, but you
sure. But at a certain point, your game is going to change.
Yeah.
So again, going back to what I said, okay, the 10-year master plan. Well, who are we selling that to? Is it the 45-year-old junior member who, has just started, their company's doing pretty good and they have time to play golf now?
Right.
Or it's just,
yep.
It can get really convoluted. And I think that's where, going back to the original question, what are the pitfalls? The pitfalls so many times for people are not looking at the end and working the problem backwards.
Mm-hmm.
What do I want to end up with and when?
Right. And why?
Yeah. Why do we do that?
Right.
And if we don't, and so it comes to the question, if we don't do that, let's say, okay, we have to talk about the horrible, awful, we don't talk about it subject of trees.
Right.
What I've done with a lot of people who have been don't touch my trees kind of thing is like, what is that going to look like in 10 years if we don't do some work right now?
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be better.
Mm-hmm.
Those trees are going to close over that green even more, whatever it is. Right. That slot that you're already hitting out of, from the tee box is only going to get, so come on, we have to do something here.
That same group may struggle with the reality that trees grow though, too. So you might not win that battle.
Yeah. But I think,
I know.
I think it's like, and so it's great to go back and find those pictures from 10 years before, not the 1929 pictures.
Right.
But, look at the ones from 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Say, okay, well, this is what it looked like 10 years ago and you haven't touched it. Now it looks like this. So where's the next step? Right?
I went through a discussion with a committee one time when I was at Desert Forest about bunkers and the buildups, from the sand casting on the green side of the bunker, which is a real thing. I couldn't believe that, even as a young guy, I couldn't believe that I was having that argument and that discussion. So one of the things I did from that point until I left was there was a sprinkler that I picked on every hole in front of the green and took a landscape shot of the green complex once a year, same time every year, just to show, and just filed it away. Nothing more, nothing less. Maybe somebody used it later on, but taking pictures on a periodic basis from the same point of the same thing to show some of those things. Like you said, trees, that's another one that
yeah, I mean, I know, trees, they're this whole controversial thing, but you're right. You're talking about the natural evolution of what happens to a playing surface when it gets played on.
Yeah.
And we can't avoid that unless it's not, as John Fleming used to say, it's not a museum, Wilber, they use it.
Right. Exactly right.
So I just, I guess, that end game. Okay. What do we want to be? And the successful stuff that has, that I've seen, not just the successful stuff I've been part of or whatever, but the stuff I've seen is, like, what do you want to end up with here? I mean, maybe you don't know exactly, but you can find those 4 or 5 talking points for just about every, situation that needs to be fixed and say, these are the 4 things that really need to be fixed here.
Right.
That. Okay. So, now we got that. Now we can start doing, the architecture, the archaeology, the agronomy, the underground, the above ground agronomy, all of it, right? Because nobody ever wants to talk about what's under the ground, but we have that. And now we can get to some real numbers and some real schedules.
Yeah.
And some real expectations, and it's real defensible. And if somebody says, if somebody comes to that town hall meeting, that committee meeting, and they say, well, I don't like that, it's like, okay, well, what's your talking point? And then saying, well, that just sucks. I don't like that, whatever.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, here are the 4 things that this area, this hole, this, whatever it is, needs to have happen. Why is yours more important than these? And then they kind of go, oh, I should think about that. And then, and that's where the salesmanship comes in.
Right. And I think it probably exposes it has the potential of exposing some hidden agendas by individuals that could really muck things up later on, right? I mean, if you got the two handicapper that's driving the bus on the whole conversation, his objectives are completely different than yours and mine.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, okay, so we're building these talking points, and we're going to settle on these talking points. And if one of the talking points is developed by that two handicapper that doesn't apply to anybody, you really got to look at that and say, why is that on the list?
Yep.
And to me, that's real planning. You know,
right?
To me, that says, well, we are gonna, we have a chance here now, you know, to do this, to talk about this, to try to see if we've got the money, like you said, you know, we got to plan this into the whole thing. And then we get to the how, right? And this is always the sticky glue. And I don't want to get ahead of your questions, but that point right there is what is like, okay, how do we get it done?
Right.
You know, is it you, Mr. Superintendent, and 6 or 7 of your guys out there, you know, with shovels? Or, you know, are we talking about a contractor? Are we talking about multiple contractors? Where do we go next? You know, and the how starts to become, okay, you know, we know exactly what we want to do, and we know exactly why we want to do it.
Right.
And now we got to figure out how to do it. And those require some really honest conversations. And golf course superintendents, God, I love golf course superintendents so much, just as a species, right?
Right.
Because all of us, and Kevin, I know you, and I know you've been there, and I was there, and I'm still this way. I mean, even around my own home, I want to do it.
Right.
I want to do it.
Right.
You know?
That you're leading right into my next question.
Okay, good.
What's the tipping point? Because for every person on your staff that you take away to do that project, you're taking away from something that needs to be done on a daily basis. So where's the balance?
The thing I realized one day when I was struggling to get a green complex done, just one green complex with a superintendent and his crew, right? And we're talking about, I'm not going to say any names, but it's somebody that we both know, and he's a genius, right? He's a mad genius, and his crew is just super polished, and I mean, they have it down. You know, the shop doors roll up in the morning, and it's precision.
Sure.
You know, you can look at your watch and say it, you know, it's 6:36. This guy is exactly at that bunker, you know, boom, right? And it's amazing. So you want to think of people like that and say, man, I've got an A crew.
Right.
You know, these guys have been with me a long time. They're an A crew. This is my, you know, but that's golf course maintenance. And that's got nothing to do, zero to do with working with an architect, keeping a construction schedule, going with the changes, all that sort of stuff.
Having the equipment and the technology and the know-how.
Even with the equipment. You know, I had a superintendent say to me one time, I have a guy on my crew who can run anything. Oh, really? Really? How much time has he got on a knuckle bucket?
Right. And we got a 40-year-old backhoe in the back that we're going to use to do the project.
Yeah, I get it, man. I don't want to say anything bad about that guy. I'm sure that his experience with you, yes, he's the guy, you know, if you want to go, you know, put him on the front end loader and pop up some concrete or something like that, or some asphalt, because you're pouring concrete. Yes, he's the guy to do that.
Right.
But we're talking about something like that bunker behind you.
Yeah.
You know, and working with a Jim Urbina or somebody like that who's done tons of those, and they don't really have a lot of time, you know, for on-the-job training.
Right.
Right.
And nor do they need it.
Well, it's just, yeah. It's like, okay. And in some situations, like we found we were doing the San Francisco Golf Club, and Bob Kleinstecker, you know, gave Jim some guys, and Jim trained those guys up, and they became the A players, right? But Bob could afford to have those guys not doing anything else on the golf course. You know, they were almost like extra employees.
Sure.
In a way, because he saw it coming.
Yeah.
And yes, we're going to teach you guys the technical aspect of doing a Tillinghast bunker, you know, the Urbino way. I mean, this is pretty cool. That something like that, you know, that kind of works, right?
Right.
But when you're talking about a superintendent looking at me and say, well, you know, we fix pipe every day, Dave. You know, if we have to put in a new main line and a whole bunch of laterals and a whole bunch of heads and a whole bunch of swing joints, we got this. Oh, really? Where's your wire pulling rig?
Right.
Huh?
Right.
What's that? Right? And it's like, no, yes, you're very capable, and I'm sure you have this great irrigation tech, but no, it's just no.
Especially not when there's still a golf course to be maintained.
Yeah. And so what are you going to do with that great irrigation guy? Greens are burning up because he's over here helping us on the construction thing, and his, and that satellite went down. Oh, well, I got to pull him out of here. Right. Superintendent comes over to the project side with his hair on fire.
Yeah.
And says, Jethro's got to come with me. I got a clock, that Mr. Hammersmith just ran over with a cart, and we got to figure it out. Oh, I guess we don't do any construction work today, huh?
Right.
Those situations are so bad, and so it's cringy because, like, I want everybody to learn new stuff. I'm all about teaching people new stuff. I'm all about everybody learning. Never stop learning is like this big mantra that I tell people.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, I want your crew to learn to do construction and drainage and all those sorts of things. But there are some situations where that is just not practical or possible.
Right.
And to know that and to figure that out and to skip your ego for just a second and skip that, I can do it. We can do anything, kind of mentality. It's hard.
So what goes into the decision that it's too much for us? And when you're right, it's hard because it's our golf course, right? It's the superintendent takes ownership of that property to a fault. I know because I've done that. I've been there. But there's points at which, number one, your expertise aren't to the level of being able to complete it like a contractor. But number two, you're gonna stress out your crew. You're gonna stretch them thin. So how would you counsel a superintendent on a project to say, dude, it's trust me, it's too much for your staff to tackle? And I know it's always different, but I don't think it's a very big scope that I don't think it has to get to a very big scope to say you're gonna sacrifice something else.
Yeah, I don't actually. It's not a hard sell for me anymore,
right?
Because it's a conversation of brutal honesty.
Yeah,
it's saying to a superintendent, listen, I get it, man. You love your crew, you love your staff. They're your A players. They're the people that you rely on every day to get the job done. That's awesome, right?
Right.
But and a lot of people say, well, there's this, like, everything you say before the word but is bullshit. That's not true.
Right.
But I think you really have to make an honest, ego-free assessment and say, and the way I approach it, Kevin, is just simply by man hours.
Yeah.
And I go, I just throw some of my formulas at some stuff. Okay, we have, and it goes back to knowing the numbers, right? We have this many square feet of this to do and this many linear feet of that to do.
Yeah.
And now we've broken the project up, right? We know how much pipe we're going to buy, how many heads we're going to, whatever it is, we know the project. And so then I look at the golf course superintendent and say, from a production standpoint, because now we don't work any overtime in our business.
Right.
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 It isn't sun up, sun down for all your staff.
Right.
Is it? So I go, from a production standpoint, we should expect to be able to do this many feet of this and that many feet of that, and with this many people. And so, can you spare that? Can you give me 10 guys?
Right.
So that we can keep this timeline. Oh no, Dave, no way. I've only got 14 on the staff. I said, well, there's your answer.
Right.
Because I have to get this many man hours a day in order to meet our end thing. So working backwards, again, here's our end, here's our date, here's our, we figured out the project. I don't see how this works in-house.
Oh, and by the way, would you furnish me with your labor hours for maintaining the golf course to the members' expectation level?
Yeah, sure. Well,
and then let's compare those and see if there's any slop. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of people still. And I really think in this day and age of spreadsheets and whatever, that if you don't have a good man hours summary together, and I was hyper focused about it, and partly because I was enjoying the computer programming end of it. you know,
Right.
my guys filled out a card and you know, they accounted for every 15 minutes of what they did. Right. So I knew how many hours we spent raking bunkers, how many hours of shop time, whatever, you know, wash time.
Yeah.
I drove them crazy with that stuff.
Yeah.
I probably didn't have to go that far, but at the end of a period of time, you know, I knew exactly how many hours it took to do what we did on our golf course. And so if somebody came to me and said, you know, can we do this or not do that or whatever, I knew what those answers were and I knew what the money was.
Right.
And so I'm startled at people that still can't, you know, have that conversation, because the people that they're working for with, you know, whether it's the GM or the, you know, the ownership or the, you know, the board, they're doing that in their businesses.
Absolutely.
They are.
Yeah.
They have to right now. And that's only gotten deeper. So, you know, word to the wise, you know, Mr. and Miss Superintendent, you know, if you can't explain where your hours are going, you know, expect somebody to take them away from you.
And they may not ask for it, but if you have it to present, then
You get ahead of that.
Yeah, your credibility grows by leaps and bounds.
Sure. And, you know, and it becomes less of a, hey, you know, everybody's sitting around going, I know I need 2 more people. Well, let's go figure that out and sell that.
Why and where, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a superintendent called me, and his key people were not taking their vacation hours, and it was starting to really add up, and it's starting to be kind of a thing. And they had a controller for a while who was kind of okay with every December just cutting everybody a big check and saying, here's Christmas money, you know, and then new GM, new controller. No, we're not doing that anymore.
Yeah, that doesn't work.
He's like, you know, my mechanic can't be gone, you know.
In
and
July.
I said, do you have anybody assisting him? Do you have anybody that knows? No. Okay, let's talk that through. You know, let's figure this out and say, okay, if we do it the way we're doing it, you know, that 2,080 hours, you know, that somebody should be working, we actually need 3,000 hours.
Right. Right.
So here's my other half, you know, here's my assistant mechanic sale. And you know, you present that to maybe some of the GMs and the bean counters and the, you know, the sandwich makers, and those guys don't really get it, but you show that to, you know, to people who are really used to kind of managing and dealing with numbers and stuff. And it's a pretty easy sell.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, but if you just walk in and say, well, you know, we just need more people because I feel like it, it's not going to fly.
No.
And I think it works the same way in construction, Kevin. It's the same deal. You know, a friend of mine who flips houses says it very clearly. He goes, I could work by myself and do the same work. It would take me 6 times as long. Or I could have my 5 guys and me, and I can do some other things, and they're probably better at some stuff than me.
Right. Right.
And then we, you know,
the perfect analogy.
Simple, right? Like, why is that so hard?
Yeah.
And then if these 2 guys want to go to Mexico for, you know, a couple months, then we're going to have to slow our pace. We're not going to get as much done.
Right.
Or I'm going to have to find somebody that can do what that person can do. And I think a lot of times contractors tell me that they're really happy to talk to superintendents about time and material type relationships. You know, and in a lot of cases, hey, you know, you guys are providing the materials and stuff, you know, we'll provide the labor and the equipment, and we're going to, you know, you don't want to make too much of an accounting scene out of it, but you know what those people cost.
Right. Right.
And you know what you know, essentially you're renting that equipment from that, you know, from that contractor and using their people. You know what the time and materials thing is.
Is that, in your opinion, is that a better way to go at this point?
I think
it depends on the scope, right?
Yeah, it depends on the scope, and it depends on maybe it depends on the architect. And, you know, like with some of these guys who really want to get out in the field and design stuff with their paint guns and stuff like that, I would be T&M for, you know, just to keep myself out of trouble with that.
Right. Right.
Like, okay, Mr. Architect, we'll build your great, you know, monuments to, you know, to Mackenzie here.
Yeah.
But we're going to do it on a T&M basis, and I'm going to show you per square foot that we've doubled the cost per square foot of what a better billy bunker would be or whatever, because you're out here with your paint gun.
That's right. And anybody knows every arm wave of an architect costs you $1,000, right?
Absolutely. and every meeting in the field is another, you know. And so, yeah, sure, some greedy contractors are going to go, they got the stars in their eyes. Ding, 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 ding.
Change orders.
Ding, 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 ding. Change order.
Yep.
You know, and so for some things you don't want to be working that way.
Right.
You know, say ding, 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 more time. You know, that's not, and everybody's, you know, getting paid fair, and it's, you know, I don't want contractors not to make money. Builders got to make money. We all have to, you know, businesses have to make money.
Right.
Right. So it's not about, you know, doing the gnarly thing that some superintendents try to do and just, you know, beat these contractors to death, you know, on the numbers to the point where the contractor gets smart and says, I'm just not going to send as many guys to the job.
Right.
That's how I survive this gig.
Yeah.
You know, and so if I got 4 guys here doing this irrigation thing instead of 6, you know, I'm gonna hope to be profitable, and yeah, they're gonna go a little bit slower.
Right. It's going to take you another. It'll be 6 weeks instead of 4. Yeah.
Yeah. So you know, that whole, you know, that manpower versus schedule thing, I think, is one of the pitfalls. You know, kind of packaging this up. You know, the TLDR is, if you don't understand the, you know, the pace of things and what that costs, and that, yes, we can get that done much quicker. And it's a little bit more money right now, but it won't be money later.
Right.
And it's, you can never print more time.
Right.
I can't print more time.
So this wasn't on my list, but it came up in a conversation this morning with a superintendent that's looking at a renovation project, and they're going to do a trial run on some green work. And I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was a great point. I think it's worthy of talking about, but his timeline going to split 9 and 9 on the major project. A little bit of bunker work, a little bit of green work, you know, kind of an overall, but pretty big scope.
Yeah.
But they're going to do 9 a year, and he's going to do 1 green. I'm assuming it's a practice green as a trial this year. But he said, based on my estimation of the time that it's going to take to do that 9 holes, I'm going to do this trial run at the end of that time in year 2. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So that I can see, you know, when I've got the shortest window on that on the scope of that project, what do I need to plan for at the tail end? You know, along with that, I think knowing, you know, some of the most valuable superintendent input, I think that can be added to the conversation is knowing weather conditions, knowing, you know, having influence over that. Don't start a project in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho in November.
Right.
You know, because it ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
And then somebody's going to be pissed because on the tail end, you know, you're still working on it at the first week in June when you expect it to be open then.
Yeah.
So I think having,
I'll never forget working with an architect one time on a warm season area. You know, and this architect, he was so baffled. It was, you know, it's like, listen, I don't expect to know everything about architecture, and I sure don't expect them to know about, you know, turf grass, and especially the way we hyper focus and, you know, and talk about it. But it shouldn't be a hard conversation to say, yes, I know you can come here in October and do all this work. You know, right? That's awesome. You know, October and maybe part of November.
Right.
But 1, this is our busy season here in the desert. And 2, I can't really plant Bermuda grass on that until August.
Right.
You know, or July or something. Right. So what I need you to do is come here and work in May and June. No, we can't do that. We're going to be on the East Coast. We got to, you know, we got 54 square feet to add to a T in, you know, somewhere in New Hampshire.
Right.
You know, we can't work. You know, we want to be in Arizona in the winter. It's like, well, yeah, sure, we all do.
That's right.
But that doesn't fit our grassing thing. Well, can't you do something different? Can't you nurse crop? I remember this one architect telling me, you know, can you just nurse crop the thing? They're like, no. Don't you get that all this ryegrass that you like and that you think is so pretty is all seeded into a Bermuda grass base? We have to. Right. So what are our options? Well, okay. Are we looking at sod? Are we looking at, you know, all those sorts of things? And it's like, and so finally the tough conversation came down to, you know, Mr. Architect, because you don't want to work here in May.
Probably not going to work.
Right. This job probably isn't going to work. And you're you're adding $22,000 an acre to our situation.
Right.
And we're renovating 8 acres or whatever here, or whatever that hole was, 12 acres.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, that's $250,000 just because you don't wanna.
Right.
I don't think so. Like, and I'm not trying to beat up on an architect here. I mean, a contractor, anybody's capable of that conversation. But but it's like, and they're like, oh, I hadn't really thought about that. I mean, even the superintendent was going, wow, that's a lot of money. And it's like, yeah, see,
But again, it goes back to the value of having that experience, and regardless of what it costs the club, it's going to pay them back in the long run.
Yeah. And I don't, I have given up a long time ago trying to, to explain to somebody what the value is of, it's that great story about the dude who, charges, $400 an hour to show up and fix the boat, and he's there for 15 minutes, versus the other dude who had been there for, charging $40 an hour, had been there for 10 days.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are you paying for?
Right.
You're paying for the fact that, you've been through this before. Right.
Exactly.
And so golf course superintendent who's never, this is the thing I'm looking for. It's like a super who says I can do anything, but they've never kind of been through it.
Mm-hmm.
In any part of their career, that's a tough one. And you got to kind of say, listen, I want to just kind of keep you out of trouble here.
Right. Yeah. It's for your own good.
But then, okay, so let's say we have this 3-phase plan instead of the 12-phase plan or whatever it was.
Right.
And then the super gets broken in, and they get the shorthand with the architect, and they get some, some people on the staff that can do the artwork, and they've got a contractor that they can trust for their, however it's going to work. And then round 2 gets really good.
Mm-hmm.
And then and that's when you can maybe I hate this word value engineering, but that's when you maybe can do some value engineering and see if you can scrub some ends off of some things and, and work a little quicker or whatever it may be, but experience counts.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You've learned a thing or two through that first.
Absolutely.
Phase. Yeah.
So I'm like, Mr. Superintendent, why don't you want to learn? Remember the mantra of never stop learning. This is a great learning experience for you and for the club. And yes, the round 1 is probably going to cost a little more money. You're going to have to invest in some education and some resources, but round 2 and round 3 or whatever it may end up being is going to be really fun.
And that may be the point where you can, as a superintendent, you can offer some help from your staff because what your team is capable of doing and what's not going to cost you on the rest of the golf course, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah, but just to stick your neck out like that on the front end seems like a slippery slope for a lot of guys. And I've had a lot of conversations where, you get to the end of a season and a guy's tackled a 1 or 2 green reconstruction during the season or off season. His guys are completely wasted. They're burned out. Yeah. He's tired. The members hate him. I mean, what did you save in that process? Nothing. Yeah. So as far as construction.
Okay. So, and can I just punctuate what you just said?
Absolutely.
Because, in our world, that extra 10 or 15%, it can be costly, right? But it's also the difference between good and really good.
Yeah.
Great and really great.
Right.
And
in the worst case scenario, job and no job at the end of the project.
Well, sure.
Right.
So it's like this rush to get things done. I remember Tom Mead said this to me one time. It was one of the best things that Tom's taught me. Just as a friend, and he just said, so many people are afraid of finish work, and they're afraid to walk away from something for a little bit because they get pushing.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta push. I gotta get this done. Go get the lights. Let's finish tonight, kind of thing.
Right.
And instead of getting away from it for a minute and then coming back to it and saying, wow, there's some ripple over there. And that head isn't right. And,
yeah.
And coming in and really fine tuning it. And I think that's where, he and Tom Doe, Corin Crenshaw, all those guys are, Dave Axland and Dan Proctor, amazing at being able to get away from something for a little bit and then come back and say, here's that extra 10 or 15% that I can give this. It's going to make it crazy good, instead of that push to, I gotta get this done,
right,
because of my ego or because of some number on a calendar or whatever. And yeah, we want to meet schedule, but what good does it do to, I remember a guy was all excited because he got a green finished. Dave, I got the green finish. And then I was there like a week later and it had all these ripples in it and everything. And I said, shit, dude, it's going to take us forever to top dress that out.
Take you 2 months to get out of the mess you've left because you got
it. Like, well, what could I have done? And I said, well, you could have just backed off a little bit, went and refloated that, spent some time with it, gotten off the Sand Pro and gotten the rake in your hands a little bit and just like, whistled a good tune while you were just doing better.
Right.
That's the hard stuff with this stuff.
Yeah. I agree.
And so I say, well, do you want to just get it done or do you want to have it really great? Because it can be really great, or you can just get it done. I mean, and that's fine if that's what your thing is. Like, just get it done.
Right.
We'll do our best. But I love hunting for that 10 or 15% that, is going to make a difference.
Right.
And maybe that's what's wrong with our business, Kevin. Maybe we're too wrapped up in that little bit extra, always chasing the thing that the unobtainium, and maybe we're our own worst enemies when it comes to quality and things like that. But I still think that applied correctly, that kind of thinking can make a huge difference in an operation, in a project, in a management style, all that stuff.
Yeah. I agree.
Okay.
So
I ran.
That's exactly what I wanted to talk about because I've just talked to too many superintendents in the last year or two that are they're just biting off too much and it ends up costing everything in the end. So I guess I probably have to give you some specifics. Let's say you're doing a green complex. What are your non-negotiables in construction? What are the things, you talk about that 10 or 15%. What are the things that we should never strong, but we should try to avoid at all costs cutting corners on?
Well, non-negotiables, like, are we talking about doing, a sand-based USJ or California green?
Let's say you're doing a completely new complex.
Yeah, there's no substitute for drainage,
right?
And getting the underground, all of the underground right.
Yeah.
And to me, that is a thing. That is a corner cut very often by people that they wind up later wishing they could have just put that one extra line in,
right?
Or that one extra quick coupler.
Again, how much would that have cost you on the front end?
Yeah.
Right?
Oh man, that's another. That's the irrigation designer says that's another $400 per quick coupler. Oh no, I can pull 10 of those off the job. Look at me, I'm amazing. I just saved $4,000. No, you didn't.
Yeah.
No, you didn't.
No, you didn't.
You just added $8,000
right
to down the road.
Yeah, because you're going back in and doing those.
You're going to do them.
Yeah,
and you're going to do. And I've done that with supers. Like I've walked out there and they'll say, yeah, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that. And I'm like, whoa, how did you know that you needed to do it in the first place? Well, we knew, but it's okay.
Great point.
But let's talk about that. Like, you need it, but you somehow decided you were going to pull it out, and underground is where that happens so many times.
Yep.
That extra drain line, that clean out that we know ought to be there. Taking this faux pas of construction with USJ greens kills me. Taking the green line drainage into the bunker, where you'll never have any positive pull on that green.
Right.
Putting a catch basin 10 steps off that green when it would be just as easy to get it down, 200 feet away.
Right.
Stuff like that. So there is no substitute for getting the underground right. And I've driven people crazy with that stuff.
I was looking at this a couple of years back, but I was looking at a fairly failed green actually in your backyard. And I said, well, first question, where's the drain line daylighting?
Yeah.
Under the pond. Not into the pond, underneath the liner.
Yeah. I've seen that.
Okay. How's that working for us?
We're not getting any gas exchange. And so then we go back and explain the entire situation of what what a perched water table system really does.
Yeah.
Like you didn't do that.
Yeah, and honestly, and I don't know the history of the property and whether there was a superintendent on site, but that's where your expertise as a superintendent is so important. Is stop. We got to do this right, because I'm going to own this later on, right?
Yeah, and that's the way we've always done a conversation that that some construction foreman and stuff will try to have in a bullying kind of way,
right?
To bully the super or whatever. And it's like, no, I don't care if that's the way you've always done it. That's wrong.
Yeah.
I don't care. Like,
okay. Are you going to be back in 3 years to help me rectify this situation when it fails?
That's the way we've always done it, as a death trap,
yeah.
For those kind of things. So that's one. I think two, soil management. And again, I've driven a lot of people crazy with the soil management thing, but I want to take off as much good topsoil as I can and put it somewhere where it doesn't get messed with, doesn't get driven on, doesn't get, stays nice, and maybe even like do it really well and make kind of a low pile out of it and go put some amendments to it and stuff and till all that in and, really make a soil out of that. Right. And then come back and replate that and put it all back in and get it really nice and good. And, and people don't want to do that. It's time consuming. It's hard. It's a lot of work. But at the end of the day, the consistency, around the green is so critical. Yeah. I mean, I already don't like the modular part of sand-based greens. It's like this surface is this, and you walk 2 feet off of it, and it's that. And so, we've learned to create a sandier loam, if you will.
Yeah, yeah.
And plate around these greens. If we don't just plate sometimes with pure sand, it just depends on what's available to us or whatever. But to try to decrease the modularity of the USG green itself and make that entire playing surface a thing.
Right.
That was based completely out of Tom Doak talking to me about, wanting the ball to do the same things on his contours that are mowed, that are not mowed at green height. And how do we get that back? And then being in the UK and seeing a lot of links golf and seeing that, yes, we're we're mowing this part short, but the rest of it is being treated as if it were putting surface.
Right.
That space between the bunker and right off your chin there. And we for years, I think I watched everybody compact those soils, drive on them, mess them all up. And it's like, well, we all know not to drive on that sand-based green, but you're driving on the collar,
and then just throw some sod on top of it and walk away.
No.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you listened to this week's podcast, but Armin Suni was on, and he talked about that very thing.
Did he?
Yeah. Just how, why is the bent grass outside the green in better shape than inside? And because it's not the same. Yeah. It's not the same.
Yeah. And so that comes along then with grassing.
Right.
And in a lot of cases, we're forced to make some really tough decisions about grassing. And as much as I hate to say this, sometimes sod is a thing. And, right. And actually the quality of sod that we're getting from growers now is sometimes really good. So we can be a little bit more, happy about sodding stuff or whatever. But I want to seed as much as possible, and I want to blow as much hydro mulch on top of that seed as possible.
Yeah.
And again, it's a little more expensive and a little more time consuming, but our results are phenomenal.
So specifically on that, we've talked about this, but I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast. You're dropping the seed, and then the hydro mulch goes on top.
Yeah. So like when a green surface, right? We're gonna do our final floats after we've amended with one set of amendments. That's kind of a stepped process, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I want to put down a starter. My powerful starter, whatever that may be, whatever the soils and the soil tests are telling us to do.
Yep.
But for me, it's I want to have a pound of phosphorus laying around when I throw seed.
Right.
That's kind of a minimum level. And then I want to put that seed down and I want to dimple it in with the Sand Pro. And we've done the work on this, and there's no substitute for the dimples.
Agree 100%.
raking, I've had guys try to tell me they can rake it, they can, stomp on it, pull a cocoa
100%
matter.
agree.
No. Get the Sand Pro out, and you go real slow and you dimple it in.
It's fun. It smooths it, but it just works better.
And then you get off that thing, and there's no bent grass flying around,
Right.
so you gotta do this on a calm day anyway,
Right.
all of it. And some places don't have calm days, so that's another factor. But let's just say in a perfect world, I drop seed on a calm day and I get my Sand Pro out and I dimple it in, then I want to shoot hydro mulch over the top of that at a pretty light rate, like 1,800 pounds of mulch per acre, which in the hydro seeding world is pretty light,
Right.
but with some good tackifier in that,
Yep.
And a little bit more, like an organic or carbon-based fertilizer in that mulch.
Okay, I was going to ask if there's anything else in there.
Yeah. So we do that. And again, I write a recipe for that, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But we want to have something in that mulch, right?
I like that.
And the whatever it may be, whatever we're grassing with, bent grass, whatever, it just comes flying out of the ground.
Yeah.
It's so uniform. It's completely windproof. It's irrigation proof. If that head happens to stick on, you're not going to.
That's right. You're not washing anything out.
Things from happening. You're not washing out around the head because you've blown a little bit of, you're teaching your guys to put a little bit of extra mulch around that head.
Which, if anybody's grown in more than 5 square feet of grass, if you have a washout, you will look at that for the next 5 years.
Forever.
It's horrible.
Yeah. And then we get that done, and then we look at the rest of it and say, okay, is it practical to sod around that bunker, or should I shoot that too?
Right.
And then we could put the seed in the hydro mulch and hydro seed.
Of course.
We do it by hand, not with the cannon.
Right.
We do it with the hose, and you get 5 guys on the hose, and it's hard. It's hard work.
Have you ever seen anything negative? I've heard this conversation both ways. Have you ever seen anything negative in your experience with that hydro mulch on a green surface?
Never.
What happens to it? Where does it go?
Composition.
Yeah.
I mean, it decomposes.
Okay. I'm just trying to dispel that, because I've heard people say, I would never do that. I don't want to have a layer there.
I've had some people really take me on about that one, and I'm like, it's never happened. It again, at the rates that we're using, it can't happen.
Right.
I mean, like the bank by the side of the road gets shot with like 3,000 pounds per acre.
Sure.
With a ton and a half.
Okay, good comparison. Yeah.
We're talking about 1,800 pounds per acre.
Right.
But the tackifier that we use is the key.
Mm-hmm.
I want to have that stuff that, I think in the thin world, it's called Stick Plus or whatever. It's like, it's a thing, right? It's a thing that we like because it's proven, we've put it up against all the other stuff, right?
Yeah.
So this method is not like just because Dave sat in the office one day and decided it was fun.
Yeah.
This is hard work, but I realized, like, especially when we were doing fescues and other stuff, you're not going to get somebody to grow that sod for you the way you want it.
Nope.
You're just not. So we're going to shoot it in. And we've done some construction projects where we laid 0 sod.
Right.
0. And so, yeah, it makes the hydro mulch thing completely intensive.
And it cuts the window too, doesn't it? Because you're going to have a better catch, and you're going to have a more consistent germination.
Yeah. So extra. In that case, it's almost the extra 30%.
Right.
Especially around bunker faces and stuff like that. I mean, the amazing catch that we get.
Yeah. Because you've got slopes, you've got things that are going to be almost impossible to keep consistent moisture on.
Yeah, it's shocking.
Yeah.
And it's just not a step I want to take away. And I think when people say, no, we're not going to do that, like I have a couple paragraphs that I send that basically says this isn't right.
Yeah. This is why you want to do this.
Advice, and and you're going to wish that you'd done it.
Right.
Like I was thinking about Sand Hollow, with Andy Sables. There was no sod laid out there.
Anywhere.
Any sod. No.
Which we all know is the desired way. And the only reason we got to sodding is what?
Time and holding those banks in.
Sure.
I don't want that erode. Again, that head sticks on, and I don't want to lose that entire bunker face or whatever, But we changed the mulch a little bit on those, on those more vertical faces, and do things a little bit differently there. But again, a lot of those are seed is in that blend at that point.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we use some boards and stuff to keep the overspray from happening. But the guys figure it out really quick.
Again, you're doing it by hand, so you've got more control over it than the guy
It's
40 yards away, right?
Yeah, you're painting. No, you can't do it with a cannon.
No.
It's a disaster.
Yeah.
Maybe like out in the middle of a big fairway.
Sure.
We've done it just to catch up.
Or a native area that you can access from
Exactly.
a corner or whatever.
But it never, it's just, and I've had some of these, pro hydro seeder guys tell me, oh, no, I can do it. And I'm like, no,
I got it. This isn't a roadside project.
And they're like, and I'm like, I want this here and that there and that there. And like, oh, we can't do that. Yeah.
And we're going to need you to change seed halfway through, right? And then change to a different mix.
Yeah.
So, shocking you, David.
Valley Mill was another. There was not a piece of sod put in at Valley. None.
That's great. And that's a tough site with wind and all the other stuff that you've got working against you.
Yeah, but nobody was going to grow what we wanted, and nobody was going to be able to kind of, what do you do? Like, okay, today I need to lay, a pallet of sod. Tomorrow I need to lay 18 pallets. It's a hassle. Right?
Exactly.
Stuff sitting out there. It's, it was record heat when we were trying to shoot, like this isn't, thank God we're not sodding.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's a great point too. That's a great point. So we're not going to get through all this. Clearly, we're at an hour already.
We can't cover the entire
construction process. No. So I want to wrap up construction with a question, and maybe we can't do this in a timely fashion, but I met with a superintendent from the Midwest recently. He's at a very high profile club. They're going to do a major renovation work or project at his course. He and I believe 100% he's doing the right thing, but he has a nursery, basically his own NTEP trial going.
Yeah.
How important is that to look at variety selection and look at it on your property in your region? If you've got, the caveat is he's got time.
It's insanely important.
Yeah.
And we've learned so much from those situations. And I want to go clear back to Bill Emerson at Paradise Valley Country Club.
Right.
What,
35 years ago, probably.
Huh?
40 years ago.
So then they were doing, a renovation, right? Yeah. And Bill had the foresight to go out and, take I think it was a nursery green that was there, but they stripped it off and they seeded a bunch of lots on the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what I loved it. This is so great. Bill he had his map of what the grasses were, but there were no like tags or whatever.
Right.
So when you came out to visit him, and he would hand you 5 or 6 quarters and say, go put quarters in your favorites. And then kind of tabulate the results. And then later he would tell you what you picked.
Did he give you parameters with which to pick your favorites?
No.
Because he knew you knew what you were looking for.
Because the stuff had all been seeded at the same time.
Right.
And it was under the same management. It was getting watered the same way. And just go tell me what you like.
Right.
Right. And he did that with everybody that walked on the property.
Mm-hmm.
Did it with me several times, Ed Miller did it. There's a bunch of people that were there that, that Bill handed the quarters to. And I hope Sean listens to this because if he remembers a little bit about that.
Well, Sean did the same thing for years at Desert Mountain. I mean, he always had an NTEP nursery going.
So good.
Yeah.
And then Bill would show you the map and show you what you liked, what you picked. And then later he tabulated all that and said, here at my place, 80% of the people that walked out on this thing loved the Providence the best, the 11 or the 1019.
Right.
And so why wouldn't I plant that grass? Right. All the professionals love it, and he had putters and balls if you wanted to putt on it, if you wanted to, because he made long strips. Right. So it was like you could putt down the strip.
Real world.
Very.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, this is so good. So what is there is no substitute for knowing what goes on in your world. But here's the danger, and I hate this, and I get really upset. I get kind of gnarly about it. It's a very salty subject for me, is the marketing side of talking about grass characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that stuff's thatchy. oh, you can't top dress into that stuff, or you know, that needs a lot of fungicide, or
Right.
where's this stuff coming from? Like,
Well, but that underscores what we're talking about, the importance of applying it to your maintenance regimes, right?
to your situation and your maintenance regimes. And so the
Yeah.
hard part can be, let's say somebody's been growing POA, their career, and now we're going to do bent grass greens, and so they don't really have a program. We can do that test green, but they're like, we don't know, the
Right.
mowers aren't set up for it, the fertility's not set up for it, and all that sort of stuff.
But again,
but it becomes a great learning situation.
that's exactly right. That's
Exactly.
exactly right. And I'm trying to affirm his decision to do that, and he's analyzing and being very, very analytical about it. But in a world where I'm shocked at how few golf courses have a working nursery, maybe
Right.
that's a luxury. But if you're thinking about going into a situation where you're going to put 18 new greens in, I think it's a pretty inexpensive thing to do in a trial fashion.
Look,
See if it's going to work.
I mean, confirmation bias is a thing.
Right.
And I'd be lying if I didn't say, like if somebody called me today and said, hey, we need to do a bunch of greens in Denver, at this spot on these soils and all this sort of stuff, I'm going to have 2 or 3 grasses.
Of course.
And maybe 1 or 2 that are really my,
Yeah.
that I know are going to be the rock star grasses. And yes, I would probably like 1 or 2 of those to win, but I still wouldn't approach it that way, because it's no good for the superintendent. It doesn't do me any good. It doesn't do him any good.
Sure.
Her any good to just say, well, here's the grass you should plant. I used to do that. Like I used to say, this is my recommendation. That's it. Now we try to do what you said. And if there's time and it can work out, it's a phenomenal learning thing.
Yeah.
It has to be a big enough area. And, and so, what do you get to learn? You get to learn a seeding technique.
Mm-hmm.
You get to learn the grow in technique. You get to learn the early stage grow in, maturation phase, the conditioning phase, and all of those things are starting to get ingrained because most people haven't done that stuff.
If you can put it in a place where you're going to be at the greatest disadvantage, to see how whether it's shade or wind or whatever climatic condition you're facing, make it a worst case scenario.
And then to get rid of the confirmation bias.
Right.
It's like, I remember a superintendent said to me one time, he had moved clear from across the country, to a job. And I'm not one of these people that's a big believer in regionalization, as far as like, it's not that grass is grass, but I think, a lot of times, good turf people can move around a little bit.
Right.
Right. And figure it out. If they know what they're, if they know how to look at soil temps and look at the weather right and all that sort of stuff.
Exactly.
But the superintendent says to me, he says, well, I'd always grown XYZ over there. So, and I'm like, really? Is that? Sure about that?
Right. Right.
Like, let's think about that for a minute. You're in a,
you're on Long Island, and now you're on the Monterey Peninsula. Really?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't know. Let's do some work on that. And that's when I kind of fall into Columbo mode, and I kind of just start asking questions.
Right. One more question.
Okay, now, wait a minute. Let's go back to the,
right.
Soil temperatures. I'm a little confused about it. We just work through it. And our business is about confirmation bias. We have our preferences. It's hard to shuck that off. But sometimes you can really have your eyes opened.
Sure.
To something that you didn't think was possible. Right. I'm thinking about a place where we threw a blend of 2 grasses together that nobody would blend, probably because they were from 2 different companies, and it turned out to be the very best thing.
And that's okay.
And it's like, well, we can blend seed in the shop.
Right.
Buy some from these guys and buy some from those guys, and let's box it in the bucket.
1-to-1. Let's go.
Well, then what if I tell people what the greens are? I don't know. You tell them it's featherbed bent. I don't know.
Right. Northern California Sensimilla.
Yeah. Tell them it's Monkey Hill Farms special blend. I don't know.
Right.
What difference does it make?
It doesn't matter.
Well, what if something goes wrong? So something goes wrong with your grass. You're going to call one company or the other and say your grass screwed up.
And you've automatically given yourself more chance of success if you mix things up.
I've
right.
been really I hate the monostand thing. And
Right.
after working in the UK and stuff, and just, like monostands are not the deal. This pure stand of, of one variety of bentgrass thing, I think is not the deal. I think history will tell us that we did that wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That monoculture in and of itself is, a bad thing. I really believe in what Michael Pollan says about that, and some of the, some of the plant people. It's like, you're asking for it.
In a larger agricultural world, yeah, we already know that, right?
Yeah, like, if you the russet Burbank potato is really cool for French fries, but you plant, a whole state full of russet Burbanks and something goes wrong, yeah, they're all done
for 30 years, right? Yeah.
So I'm like, why can, nature's gonna win. Somebody was asking me, an architect was sending me some questions the other day about, because there was this article in CNN about, how bad golf courses are or whatever.
Horrible.
And it's like, well, the question was, what happens to this water that we apply? Doesn't some of it evaporate? Doesn't it return flow and all that sort of stuff? And I wrote back and said, yeah, I mean, all those things are true, but the contaminants in those situations, I mean, the solution to that pollution is the dilution,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and also this, the soil, the air, all these things are natural scrubbers, aren't they? And then my last thing was, and I know nature wins.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So yes, we could probably do some stuff and say, maybe let's be a little less toxic, or, a little bit more careful, with the way we apply with things or whatever we do. That's good. But let's not be silly and say, well, the earth is running out of water. And so if you golf courses just keep using water, well, that water is returning somehow to the ecosystem.
Yeah. It
somehow.
has to.
Yeah. It's just where and how and as what.
Mm-hmm.
So I know it was a very,
there were a lot of things wrong with that article, but that's,
I don't get how you can write an opinion piece, because I've written opinion pieces for years. Hey, Dave Wilber thinks,
Right.
and that's what it is.
Yeah.
This is an opinion piece, but that thing was written as an opinion piece, but it shows as journalism. They want to show it as journalism, and it's not.
Right.
Good journalism covers both sides of the argument, as has, real evaluation expertise, and, there's none of that. So I don't, something like that is going to, it's just, it's gone in a few thousand clicks and nobody sees it again.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So let's not lose sleep over it. All right, let's wrap up with this. I usually do a lightning round or something, but and we talked about this before we got on the air.
Why did I ever introduce that?
Give me one great story from 2021 in the golf industry. And you said you'd need an hour to come up with one, but your hour's up now. It's time. What came out of this year that it's been another challenging year for us as a community, as a golf community. But what's one good thing that pops into your head?
Well, can there be two?
Yeah.
I guess we've always known, and again, it's getting back to superintendents being very, very capable people, and usually the most capable people on their property.
Right.
Sorry, GMs and pros, but they're used to getting it done on a schedule, in a way that a lot of people just don't know how to do. And I've seen people pull rabbits out of the hat in some ways. They're just kind of stunning, as far as just, I think what I'm trying to get at is that leadership, which we all have to do, has taken on a very different turn. The feeling that people have about the responsibility they have of their staff's health, and all those things, it's been pretty cool to watch.
Yeah, I would agree.
It's been pretty cool to see some things get cleaned up, to see some, some shop facilities, get a little more polished, as far as like the PPE thing goes, and the,
sure.
And the, just, hey, we're renovating the restrooms, because we just want it to be better and safer.
Yeah.
And along with those things comes some, some good thinking, like, so I see everybody really taking really good care of their staffs, because the staffs are valuable, and it's, and it's real, and it's very personal.
Yeah.
And I love that.
That's great.
And I think it's, I want to sit here and say, and I know you want to say, well, I always love my staff. I was, and all this sort of stuff, but it's a different, it's a different vibe.
It is. You're right.
Yeah. And so I love that. More specifically, for me, I think story is important, and I've been not shy about telling my stories, and some of them are pretty dark and some of them are pretty goofy. And I've gotten a little bit of like, I don't care, like I'm here in a hoodie, like I didn't, I think there was a Dave that would have, went and clean, put my shirt and buttoned it all the way to the top button, and, all those things that I would do. But, it's just a different time for that. And I'm 55 now.
Right.
It's the same thing with my golf game. I'm not as deep into it. But what I see is, how do I put this?
I think I know where you're going.
What I see are people willing to share their personal experiences and stories in ways that are real, that matter, that reach, that are spoken in the language that we all speak, and they're relatable, right? And like, I'm thinking about, recently, seeing Brian Ewell, actually sharing his story, of his stuff, and seeing, somebody like Miranda Robinson, come to Colorado from British Columbia, and, and really talk about, what anxieties meant in her life, and how she handles that on a day-to-day basis, in her job. And, the people are getting less and less afraid to tell their story and to be their story, and not deny, the painful days that some of this is brought on.
Right.
It's like real emotion. And I'm not getting old and soft when I say that. I mean, I've always been a kind of an emotional cat. And a lot of times, Jim Farron and I used to talk about this, how, it was really hard to get superintendents to talk about their emotions and how they felt about something.
Mm-hmm.
But you go on the golf course and they'll say, well, I feel, the grass makes me feel this way. They're completely intuitive when it comes to turf grass or their dog or, whatever. Right. But then, but other than other real life stuff. And so the extension of what that is, now on Twitter and stuff, we talk about our barbecue successes and our baking successes. We talk about our successes and our failures just as much, and it's very much more open than the business has been in a long time.
And balanced, right? I mean, and that's where I thought you were going, was just talking more about balance. And I think that's so important, because there is a balance. That's the reality.
Yeah. I mean, I don't, the whole work-life balance thing and work hard, play hard, I always thought work hard, play hard was kind of a boomer, kind of concept.
Right.
Right. Like, I always thought the more Gen X concept was work-life integration.
Mm-hmm.
And I think millennials, do that too. It's like, well, I can, my friend Scott Hess always said it. He's like, I can, I can be sending work emails while I'm in bed with my boss. It's probably not exactly, I mean, but the point being is that, a lot of the old school rules and stuff about, this happens here and that happens there. And there is the wall is built, is just, that's not how it works. It's never worked that way for me.
Right.
I've never been a clock watcher and stuff. And people used to say, well, how many hours? I don't know how many hours I'm working. I mean, it just, how do you count, waking up an extra hour early just to make sure that I got the crew schedule together?
Sure.
I mean, so I don't, I just see people being, much more, you're right. Balance is probably the word, and being way less afraid to say that's enough.
Mm-hmm.
I can't take it. I'm stepping back from this for just a second, and catching my breath. And, maybe that manifests itself in in a few extra days off, or that summer vacation they've never had, or, whatever it may be. But at least and Paul McCormack would say, the mindfulness thing and all that. Sure. It's about mindfulness, but it's also about, some people who really are under the bad illusion that they can throw more time at something and it's going to dramatically get better. Yeah, you might get that 10%, and sometimes the 10% is worth it, but sometimes you're doing yourself way more harm than good by standing there closing your hand in the car door.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
agree. I agree.
oh, that
Yeah.
hurts. Ow, that hurt.
Easier said than done, but you'll never regret doing it.
Here's an idea: pull your hand out of the door and then
Yeah.
close it.
Yeah.
But it's so many people just won't do that, you know.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do it at all. And
Right.
it's been very costly in a lot of ways.
Yeah, but
And,
to see guys employing that in their day to day is encouraging, and it's the right thing to do, and I love it.
I said to somebody at the Rocky Mountain Conference, you know, they were talking to me about something to do with Asia or whatever, and I'm like, what is stopping you? Well, COVID. Okay, you know, that's another deal. But like, what's stopping you from taking 2 weeks and, you know, 2-3 weeks this winter when nothing's going on? I mean, sure, I'm sure you think you need to be there grinding reels, but you know that can be taught. To just, you know, just hit the road, go travel.
Right.
You know, oh, you've always wanted to see New Zealand. No, don't wait until you're old like me and can't walk and
Right.
you know, and it hurts, you
Right.
know, and all that sort of stuff. I mean, you know, you're 30, go do this.
Yeah.
You're not gonna have that opportunity. So that's, I think, for a lot of people, they're realizing, hey, I don't want to wake up in 10 years, you know, having not, you know, seen my kids, you know,
That's
let my
perfect.
relationships flourish, you know, whatever those things may be.
Yep. That's a perfect way to wrap it up. Go do it. Go do it.
Go do it.
All right,
I'm going to talk about that in one of my next podcasts.
Yeah, I love it.
Because there's a few of my stories I haven't told because I figured that a few golf people would go, you know, like, why'd you do that? Why'd you take time to do that?
Right. Right.
So I'm going to do that. Okay.
All right, my friend. We've run long, but I think it was good, and hopefully there's still a few people listening at the end of this. But I think it's all worth it. And
I just want to say this too, and this is not a suck-up-a-thon because you know I like to tease Joel, and I know I teased him on my last thing, and you know the whole, you know, that old guy band on the porch thing just sent me. You know, I mean, I had laughs about that for days. You and I had laughs about it. I even made another video just laughing about it, you know, just to be silly. And but I think what you guys are doing, like, you know, the way that you're carrying on, you know, this kind of conversation and stuff is really good. And I'm glad to see you just like staying on the throttle with it. You know, there's a ton of people that want to do podcasts, they want to do vidcasts, they want to do that sort of stuff, but they don't realize how much work it takes.
It's not easy. It's not easy to be consistent and to be and to come up with new content. And I think we all do it a little bit differently, which I think is also really, really good.
Yeah, and it's funny because somebody said to me the other day, they said, you know, it's just the same crew of people that are just kind of making the rounds, and it's like, I don't know that that's completely true, but I said to them, I said, you should be the person trying to get somebody to get on a podcast who just wouldn't, you know. I mean, I'm thinking about you know, Josh Lewis and what I had to go through to get him to talk about the 2015 US Open.
Right. I got one coming next week that's going to be really fun. So
yeah, I mean, like I had to publicly shame the dude. I had to, you know, and that podcast ended up winning a TOCA award.
Right.
Because it was because the conversation was so honest, and it wasn't just about the US Open. It was also about his friend dying and, you know, and the human side of it. And, you know, I think a lot of I don't want to say non-turf people, but a lot of people that maybe haven't grown grass or haven't really dipped themselves in it as deeply as, you know, as some of us have, you know, in whatever way, you know, they think that, well, I'm going to produce content, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this turf problem and what the fix is and how to never have it happen again. And, you know, look, no, that's not our business. That's not how any of this works.
Yep.
And so the human side and you know, talking through the story of how or whatever happened, you know, at XYZ situation. Yeah, that's what I want to hear. That's what I always wanted to drag out of people.
Next week will be fun.
Try to drag out of myself. So you guys are doing great with this, and I think it's awesome, you know, just to see, you know, good personalities and many different personalities, you know, and
appreciate that.
All of you doing that. So hats off to you for that.
Awesome. David, thank you.
Thanks, man.
Since this will be probably next week, Merry Christmas. We're getting awfully close to that, hard to believe. And I'm sure we'll talk, but have a happy new year. And I wish everybody out there happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and looking forward to next year. Make sure to subscribe if you aren't already so that you get the updates on a weekly basis. And thanks everyone for listening. David, thanks for putting up with us again. It was great. Went a little long, but who cares? It's good stuff. So
what we do.
As always, appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you soon.
Happy holidays.
Thanks, David.